Hey everyone! 3 weeks since I last uploaded to this channel. I got sick with COVID, and just as I thought I was recovering, my 3-year-old caught it. It wasn't too bad in general, but boy did it drag on. I had a mild fever for about a week, was lethargic, was coughing up a storm. I even lost my sense of smell and taste, which was a nightmare because I love to eat. My daughter's better now, and I've stopped coughing every 10 seconds, so now I can record again. I'll share 2 stories with you today, with the second one being a Reddit post, which is a first for this channel. So, without further ado, let's get started. This happened 17 years ago in the winter of my 3rd year of high school. I've lost so much of my memory, so I'm relying on what I can remember. I've written this while referring to my notes, so I've added and revised some details and conversations, but I'll try to write it as I remember with as little exaggeration as possible. The place where I used to live was really rural. As far as I can remember, it was surrounded by rice fields and mountains, and the only place to go out to was a karaoke bar that you had to drive an hour on your moped into the city. In this remote area, a certain new religious facility was suddenly built in 1991. At the construction planning stage, there was a fierce backlash from local residents, and I think my parents often attended the opposition rallies. They submitted petitions to the mayor and the prefectural governor and tried to appeal to the local media, but the religious group presented certain conditions and forced the construction. There were various speculations and rumors about those said conditions in the local area, but the most common theory was that the local government turned a blind eye to the voices of the residents because they donated a large amount of money to the depopulated town. The religious facility was built on the edge of the area where we live, and I think the land area was about the size of 2 or 3 Tokyo domes. Because the town was such a hole, the land was probably cheap. The facility was completed in the fall of my 2nd year of high school, and my parents and homeroom teacher warned us to stay away and to not get involved with anyone there. But of course we were curious, so I went to see it with about 8 of my classmates. It was surrounded by high walls, and there was a huge gate in front of it, and at the top of both ends of the gate there were carvings of what looked like a demon with a terrifying face. When my classmates saw it, they got excited and started saying that they were a cult. We probably weren't the only ones who thought this, so the religion started to be called by strange nicknames at school like the Devil's Cult and the Hanya organization. You may not know what Hanya is, but I'm sure most of you have at least seen the mask depicting it. It's used in traditional Japanese theater and represents a jealous female demon. It's characterized by 2 sharp bull-like horns, metallic eyes, and a leering mouth with fangs. The type of mask changes according to the degree of jealousy, resentment, and anger of the female and represents a female onryo, which is a vengeful spirit. It is said to be even more resentful and malicious than the namanari, or a woman on the verge of becoming a demoness. In our free time, a few of us would go around the facility on our bikes, but strangely enough, we never saw any believers or other people affiliated to it. In fact, everyone's interest gradually waned because of that. By the 3rd year of high school, the religious facility was no longer a topic of conversation, but one day, my classmate Akihito said, "Let's actually break in and look at what's inside." Apparently, his parents had told him that a cute girl comes and goes from the Devil's Cult building. They knew this because she came to shop at their supermarket almost every day, and they were grateful because they were spending about 20 to 30,000 yen each time, or about 140 to 210 US dollars in today's currency exchange rate. Akihito continued, "My parents said the members are all quiet and nice. They don't sound scary at all. Come on, let's go." As I mentioned earlier, there was nothing interesting to do in this town, so we all agreed. The group consisted of 7 guys, 5 of us from the same class, which included myself, Akihito, B, C, and D, and E and F, who were in the year below us. We figured it wouldn't be scary if we were a group of 7 guys. We met in front of the abandoned post office close to the facility. When I arrived, Akihito, B, C, and E were there, but D and F didn't show up even after waiting for 30 minutes, so the 5 of us decided to go. After parking our bikes near the facility, we walked to the gate. It was ominous. One of us mumbled that they should have brought another flashlight with them. We got closer to the huge gate and noticed a light on in the far building on the property. Wondering who could still be awake so late, we looked for a way to get in when Akihito told us he knew how to get us in. He led the way to a small gate around the corner. He pushed it, and to our surprise, the gate swung open. It was just big enough to fit one person, so we lined up and entered the premise one by one. Once inside, we walked around the outskirts close to the surrounding wall, turning our flashlights on and off. But there really wasn't much to see, and we started to get bored, so we decided to go a bit closer to the main building. There was a long, empty lot about 100 meters or 330 feet from the front gate, and beyond that were 3 large buildings lined up. I don't remember exactly, but its exterior had a very strange design. As we were sneaking around, we came across a nice lit public toilet building between the buildings. The area around the toilet was paved with beautiful white concrete and even had a bench. Akihito suggested we take a break, and we all looked at him as if he was crazy. If we got caught, the police would most likely get involved, and that wouldn't be good for any of us considering our high school graduation was creeping up on us. All 4 of us felt that way and said we should just go home since there wasn't anything interesting to see anyway, but Akihito ignored us. He sat down on the bench and took a cigarette out. As he lit it up, he said, "Let's go home after this smoke break." We couldn't leave him there by himself, so we all gave in, sat down, and smoked. When Akihito was done, he announced that he needed to go to the toilet and disappeared. The rest of us didn't move and joked around that he might get cursed by the devil if he took a shit in there. A minute or so later, we heard Akihito calling out to us in a hushed whisper. "Yo guys, come here, there's something I need to show you." The 4 of us looked at each other and got on our feet. When we walked into the bathroom, Akihito was pointing to one of the stalls and told us to look inside. Wondering whether he was playing a joke on us and wanted to show us the log he just expelled, we took a peek inside just to entertain him. Instead of a toilet, we saw a hole with a staircase leading into the basement. It was totally unexpected and weird as fuck. Not only that, I started to get a bit suspicious of Akihito. First off, he knew about the small gate that got us into the property. He accidentally discovered this strange staircase, and now he was saying we should go down there to check it out. I, of course, refused to go down, telling him once again that we needed to get home before someone found us snooping around. He started to make fun of me. Go figure. But D&D were keen and agreed to go as long as it was quick. Akihito continued to poke fun at B and I, but we absolutely refused to go, so the 3 of them told us to stay put and disappeared down the stairs. We decided it would be best to stay inside rather than risk being seen outside. After a few seconds of silence, B asked whether I thought Akihito was acting weird. I said that I did. It felt like he led us to these stairs from the get-go, to which B agreed. With that, we began to brainstorm what we should do if someone found us. About 5 minutes went by with no sign of the guys returning, and we started to get irritated and scared. We contemplated just going home, but the guys took all the flashlights we had, and not knowing where the small gate we crawled through was, we reluctantly decided to wait. It was then that we heard footsteps from afar. Footsteps from more than one person. We were instantly nervous and started freaking out. We couldn't figure out which direction they were approaching from, so there was no way we could run outside. Even if we had, we wouldn't have known which direction to run to get out of the property. It would have increased the likelihood of us being found. I tried to stay calm and told him we'll hide somewhere if they were actually approaching the toilets. They might be heading somewhere else after all. We stood there not moving a muscle and straining our ears. The footsteps were definitely getting closer. B ran over to the next stall and tried to open the door to hide inside, but it was locked. He went to the one next to it, but that was locked too.
Damn it, they're locked. What are we going to do?
The footsteps were much closer now, maybe within 15 meters or 50 feet. B and I were practically sure by this point that the people were heading towards the bathroom. We stood there frozen, and B finally said,
"We have to go down."
I still didn't want to, but we had no other choice. Now that the people were so close, there was no way we could sneak out without being seen. We opened the door to the stall that had the stairs leading down. B walked in first. The stairs were made of concrete. I had envisioned the stairs to be long and winding like the ones you might see in vampire movies, but it only took about 10 steps to reach the bottom. There were no windows and no lights, so it was pitch dark. I couldn't see anything, so I followed B's footsteps. I then saw a glow of orange light suddenly appear before my eyes. B must have found a door and opened it. We both looked through the slight gap in the door to see what was inside and to make sure no one was there. There were several orange light bulbs hanging from the ceiling, bathing the entire room in a pale orange color. It was eerie. Seeing no one inside, we quickly slid into the room and closed the door quietly. We looked around. It was a bare, square concrete room about 25 square meters in size. What caught our eye was the large circular object hanging in the middle. It looked like a giant iron hula hoop that was hanging vertically from the ceiling. It was oriented diagonally and was so big that it touched the walls on two opposite corners of the room. We didn't move. We didn't want to touch anything. I whispered as quietly as I could.
"Where are the other guys? They're not here."
B just shook his head, his mouth set in a frown to communicate that he didn't know. Then, just as we had predicted, the footsteps entered the bathroom. It was directly above us, echoing through the concrete walls. There must have been 3 or 4 people. We didn't dare move and stood there, listening. We could hear the people talking, but the voices were too muffled, so we couldn't hear exactly what they were saying. B had his head down and his eyes closed. I don't know how much time had passed, but I was trying to think back on a funny show I had watched a few nights before, trying to do anything to keep from soiling myself. Before long, the number of people in the bathroom had increased to a larger group of about 10 people. I felt at that moment that they knew we were down in the basement. They were probably discussing what to do with us. I was so scared that I began to tremble. I thought I would faint. Suddenly, the muttering stopped and I heard 2 doors open, followed by another bang. It was the sound of the toilet stalls opening. A terrifying thought shot through my mind. Maybe there were people inside the other stalls from the beginning. I think we had all assumed that the locked stalls were done from the outside to close the bathroom for use at the end of the day, but maybe it was actually occupied by people. And that means they knew for a fact that we had snooped into the premises and come down to the basement. A few moments later, we heard footsteps coming down the stairs. I started looking around frantically to check if there was anywhere I could hide. They'd be in the room in less than 10 seconds now. I grabbed onto B's arm. The footsteps reached the bottom stairs and began making its way towards the room we were in. It was then that B shook his arm loose from my grasp, screamed, and ran to the back of the room. I still can't believe this, but just as he jumped through the huge metallic hoop, he disappeared into thin air. I stifled my scream and stood there in utter shock, unable to comprehend what I'd just witnessed. The door slowly opened, but my eyes were still glued to the hoop and where B had disappeared. I was about to start begging for forgiveness for trespassing and finally turned towards the door, my heart beating so fast I thought I might just conk out. A face popped out through the gap. It was an old man, or it could have been an old woman. I couldn't really tell in the dim light, but he was wearing some sort of crown and looked at me with a broad smile. It wasn't a friendly smile, nor one that showed any anger. It was a creepy, malicious smile. I had a gut instinct that this person was insane and chose the lesser of two evils and decided in a split second to jump through the hoop. When I came to, I was in a hospital room. My brain was foggy, I had a massive headache, and I saw that I had an IV drip in my arm. It took me about 3 minutes to finally sit up. I looked out the window and saw a beautiful sunset. I was all alone in a private hospital room. I sat there, my thoughts all jumbled up. I don't know how long I stared like that for, but after a while I heard the door opening and a nurse walked in. She opened her eyes wide when she saw me sitting there and she ran out of the room without a word. A couple minutes later, she came back in followed by several doctors. They started talking to me and asking me questions, but I couldn't make sense of anything. Their voices sounded muffled as if they were talking to me from behind a glass window. My brain fog started to lift, but that didn't help me understand what was happening at all. The doctor told me he'd called someone's family earlier, that this person had been in a coma for a long time, but that there was nothing to worry about. And then he said,
"You're okay now."
What did he mean by that? He wasn't referring to me by my name, so I had assumed he was talking to me about someone else, which was already confusing to begin with. But it seems he was referring to me the entire time. Did he have me confused with someone else? I had zero sense of time. What day was it? How long had I been in the hospital for? Where was I? An hour or so later, a woman and a young girl came into the hospital room, crying. They were calling me by a different name, saying they were so happy to see me awake. The young girl referred to me as her big brother, so I guess the older woman was my mother, but I'd never seen them before in my life. I never had a little sister. I, in fact, only had a brother who was 3 years younger than me. I kept asking who they were because they were clearly strangers and there was a huge mix-up here. The doctor reassured the two women that I was just confused and that my memory would come back eventually. I underwent various tests that day and did all I could to try to convince the doctor that I wasn't who they thought I was, but he only listened with half an ear, saying intermittently that my memory will soon come back and everything will be just fine. I found out at this time that I had been in a coma for 2 entire years, but the shock and confusion of seeing people I don't know claiming me to be someone else was way more of a jolt to the system than finding out that I had missed 2 years of my life. I couldn't accept nor believe the doctor's words. He was gentle and chose his words carefully when talking to me, but I just couldn't let it go. My supposed mother was now crying because I didn't recognize her. At one point, I had to go to the bathroom and tried to stand up, but my legs wouldn't move like I needed them to, so the doctor, nurse, and my fake little sister helped me to the bathroom. And then everything came flooding back. The night that my friends and I snuck into the religious building, how we went into the bathroom and discovered the stairs leading down to the basement from one of the stalls. I literally had a panic attack. I was deathly afraid to step into the bathroom, but the doctor told me everything was all right, and I walked in. There was a mirror above the sink, and when I looked at it, I screamed. The face looking back at me wasn't mine. It was a completely different person, someone I'd never seen before. I screamed again and wet my pants. I was hospitalized for another month after that. I kept telling anyone who would listen that the people who were claiming to be my family weren't who they said they were, and I wasn't who they claimed to be either. Other people came to visit me, those who said they were my friends and my school teacher. I didn't know any of them. I kept talking about Akito and B and the memories that I still had and could remember, but everyone dismissed it as an elaborate dream while I was in a coma, a memory impairment, or amnesia. I explained to them about the religious facility my friends and I snuck into and the huge hula hoop in the middle of the room. I was persuaded that none of the friends I was describing actually exist, but they weren't abrasive about it. They kept telling me as gently as possible that this was my real life and that my memory was just a figment of my imagination. According to the doctor and those around me, a passerby found me unconscious next to my bike and I was taken to the hospital. Every fact they told me was completely new to me. When they told me I was in Kanagawa Prefecture, I didn't know where that was. I'd never even heard of it before. I had no clue what the Japanese yen was or any other currency. I had never heard of Tokyo either. It was as if I didn't know anything about Japan. The names of other countries didn't ring a bell either. It was all new to me. All historical events and famous historical figures were erased from my memory too. But I could still speak and understand the Japanese language. Lucky for me, for some reason, that had remained intact. I could also recognize everyday items like newspapers, chairs, remote controls, etc. I eventually began to question myself. I really began to wonder if I'd actually just dreamt these things up. Regardless of the truth, I had no choice but to continue living this life. I had no way of tracing anything from my memory to check if any of it actually existed. After I was discharged from the hospital, my father, mother, and sister took me back home. As we drove back to the house, I stared blankly out the window. The houses, the streetscape, everything was new to me. My parents sent me to a therapist to help me get back into this life that I had no memory of being a part of. It helped me cope and adapt. I felt a tremendous amount of grief of having lost the people that were now completely gone from my life. For the first couple of months, I didn't get along with my family. I was polite, but I did everything for myself. I did my own laundry because it felt weird for total strangers to wash my underwear. But as the days progressed, I slowly began to get used to the idea that maybe we were a real family, and my previous life was either a past life or a dream. And at the same time, I gradually began to forget my previous life. It took me longer and took me more effort to remember the faces of my parents, my brother, my friends, and the countryside where I used to live. The one thing that remained crystal clear in my mind, though, was that facility, and especially the face of the old man that peeked into the room just before I jumped through the hoop. Anyway, I eventually got used to my new life. The number of counseling sessions decreased, and I returned to high school 6 months later. I had to redo my senior year of high school at the age of 20. I made friends and began to enjoy life again, and especially enjoyed the city life. I watched a bunch of TV shows that I'd never seen before. Everything was new and refreshing. All was well until 4 months after going back to high school when an unexpected commonality appeared that connected my previous life to the present one. During summer break, I was in a bookstore looking for a book that I needed for homework. As I was perusing the shelves, a particular title caught my eye. It was the name of the religious movement that my friends and I had tried to infiltrate that night. I picked it up straight away and began reading through it. I found out for the first time that it was a fairly large organization with branches all around the world. In my old life, no one had heard of them, but in my new reality that I was now a part of, it seemed to be a worldwide religious organization. I picked out a few other books about them and bought the bunch, but reading them was a futile act. It didn't change anything. It wasn't going to take me back to my previous life, and gaining more knowledge about them didn't help to prove my past to anyone. At this point, I'd accepted my life and didn't want to stir it back up again or make my family and friends worry about me. They all seemed to be relieved and happy that I'd stopped talking about it, and most of all, I didn't want to go back to counseling again, even though it did help me move on. As I write this, 17 years have passed, and I'm now an ordinary guy working in an office in Tokyo. I guess you're wondering why I'm writing about this experience after so many years. Well, last month I received a letter. It was anonymous and it said, I'm sorry for this sudden message. I know you well, and you know me well too.
It took a long time and it was really difficult to find you. Your name is Tomoki. Do you remember? I will send you another letter in due time. Please do not tell anyone about the contents of this letter, not even your fiancé.
It no longer rings a bell when someone calls me Tomoki, but I think that used to be my name. The letter didn't stir up anything special within me. I felt no fear, nor did I feel some kind of excitement that I was right all along. It felt like it was almost meant for someone else. Then, last week, the person who wrote the letter sent me a second one. To summarize, it said,
My name is Ada. You don't remember, do you? It seems that you and I are the only ones left.
And then it said that he will be waiting for me in front of a particular train station at 7 p.m. on the 25th of this month. He said he needed to tell me something important. I have no idea who Ada is. The name doesn't ring a bell, but I intend to go meet him. I feel like I must. I don't know if I'll recognize the person waiting for me, but if Ada is one of my friends who were with me that night, I'm sure I'll remember. I really hope it's B. I don't know what will happen once I meet him, so that's why I decided to share my story tonight. I will leave a letter of a similar nature for my fiancé and my sister, who is now my only remaining family. Thank you all for reading this long message, and wish me luck. My name is Jules, and this story happened in 2022. At the time, I was a business school student, but my English skills left much to be desired. To improve, I decided to take a gap year and move to Toronto, Canada for intensive language courses. Since the costs were high, I found a shared apartment with other students. It had 3 bedrooms and one was still empty, waiting for another student to move in. My roommate Sandro, who was a Swiss German, tall, almost 2 meters and 120 kilos, but also very friendly, we quickly became friends. A few weeks later, Sandro told me he was going on a week-long road trip through Canada's national parks. He was set to leave on a Saturday morning, while I had been informed that the new student would arrive that same day around 3 p.m. Sandro left the apartment at 10 a.m., leaving me alone to wait for the new arrival. Hours went by. 3 p.m., then 4 p.m., 8 p.m., 10 p.m. Still no one. I grabbed a bite to eat, watched a show on Netflix, and eventually decided to go to bed. Around midnight, I was suddenly awakened by knocks on the apartment door. I heard someone coming in. That must be the new student, I thought to myself, before hearing an unfamiliar voice explaining the apartment's layout. I stayed in my room, too tired to go out, and fell back asleep. But a few minutes later, there were knocks on my door. Once. Then a second time 10 minutes later. Thinking there might be a problem, I eventually got up. I found myself face to face with a young Japanese woman around 25 years old. I quickly explained a few details about the apartment, we exchanged Instagram handles, and then each of us went back to our rooms for the night. In the following days, she often asked me to accompany her when taking the bus or subway. I gladly helped, showing her the stops and the good spots for getting around, and then returned to my routine between classes and gym sessions. But gradually, something strange started to happen. Every evening when I came back, she would always be talking to me, either by message or when we bumped into each other in the apartment. The situation became increasingly heavy. Then, one evening, while lying on my bed, I noticed a figure on the shared balcony right in front of my bedroom window. She was leaning against the railing, staring at me. Her gaze was piercing, unsettling. When she realized I had seen her, she quickly turned away and went back into her room. I shivered, but tried to convince myself that it was just a coincidence. Later, around midnight, as I turned off the lights to fall asleep, I glanced out the window. She was still there, standing, watching me. Our eyes met again and she vanished instantly. The scene repeated itself the following nights. Every evening, I would catch her watching me from the balcony, always at the same time, always with that fixed gaze. And every time she disappeared as soon as she realized I had noticed her. But the night before my departure, the situation took an even more disturbing turn. One morning, I had to get up particularly early for an appointment. It was 5:30 a.m. when I left my room. The entire apartment was shrouded in darkness, except for the faint light filtering from under the bathroom door where I was brushing my teeth. Suddenly, I heard a noise behind me. The young woman emerged from her room, silent, her footsteps softly echoing on the wooden floor. She knew I was there. She saw the lights under the door. I froze, a chill running down my spine. There I was, in my underwear, toothbrush in hand, wondering what she wanted. But instead of turning back, she opened the bathroom door and came in, sitting on the closed toilet, facing me. She didn't say a word. She just sat there, motionless, her gaze locked onto mine with a blank, almost empty expression. The scene dragged on for long, icy seconds, where the silence grew oppressive. Then, slowly, I gathered myself and left the room, closing the door behind me. I returned to my room very slowly, trying to show that I didn't understand what was going on, but her English was too poor for us to have a proper conversation. In the days that followed, I became increasingly cautious, watching her every move, but she continued to observe me every evening from the balcony, like a disturbing shadow in the night. Until, on the night before my departure, things took an even more terrifying turn. I was having dinner in my room when I saw her again through the window, staring intensely inside. I looked away, hoping she would leave. Then, later that night, around 3 a.m., I woke up suddenly from a nightmare. I turned my head, and there she was, still on the balcony, her eyes wide open, fixed on me. My blood ran cold. This time, she didn't look away. She remained motionless like a statue. Then, abruptly, she turned and started running inside the apartment. My heart pounded. I rushed to lock my door and buried myself under the covers, hoping it was all just a bad dream. A few seconds later, I heard footsteps behind my door, then an attempt to open it. Gently at first, then more forcefully. She was pressing on the handle, trying to get into my room. Panicked, I remained still, holding my breath. And then, everything went silent again. I heard nothing more. She must have gone back to her room, but the night felt endless. I returned to France the next day. She was no longer in the apartment. I think she was fascinated to see a European. After all, I don't have a typical build, especially not for a Japanese person. I can bench press over 150 kilos. Anyway, I also thought she might have been looking for an adventure with me or trying to steal my passport. Take care, everyone. This story is entirely true. I still have the apartment's address, the school's name, etc. For those of you who've made it to the end, thank you for tuning in. If you or anyone you know have heard of or experienced anything creepy while they were visiting Japan, or had weird encounters with Japanese people elsewhere, like in this last story, please let me know via my new Reddit community. I'm really new to Reddit. It's not big in Japan, so I'm still a noob, but I'm hoping I can gather some new stories for my channel this way. The link is in the description box below. Thank you all so much, and see you again real soon.